14th Amendment was coming up. And given the 14th Amendment's commitment to equal protection of the law, given its 14th Amendment commitment for birthright citizenship, given the 14th Amendment's section that says no insurrectionist should serve in the federal government, given the later interpretations that led to the end of racial segregation and Brown versus Board of Education, the legalizing of abortion through Roe versus Wade, the legalization of contraception through Griswold-Worth, Connecticut, and the legalizing of gay marriage, you would think that some national organization would celebrate such profound changes in the Constitution of the United States. Not the ACLU or the NAACP or other organizations, but one organization, the Thaddeus Stevens, had a special celebration to honor the 14th Amendment. So I look to Ross as not only a fountain of knowledge, but also a strategic developer of how we carry on the importance of Thaddeus Stevens. I first heard of Thaddeus Stevens in high school when the history teacher defined him as a fanatic. And then I found out that his fanaticism was for the immediate end of chattel and racial slavery and the distribution of land to the freed people. And I realized at that time the real fanatics were Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee, who fought a war that led to 700,000 deaths. We must reevaluate even today what is freedom and what is fanaticism as we move on. I always look forward to thinking about Thaddeus Stevens because he wasn't like a politician today who would look at the public opinion polls and create a certain message to get another 3% of the vote in order to win a tough race. He was someone that had a principled conviction all his life against white supremacy and against slavery and making sure there was equality in this nation. But there's something else that stood out about Thaddeus Stevens. Sure, there are many people, not often in government, that have decent principles, but how many actually ascend and able to use a pragmatic way to make his policies effective? In December 1865, the Confederates wanted to come back into this government, and we saw what they did, not only in their past, but the recently enacted black codes of inequality in the South. Well, Thaddeus Stevens was real strategic and made sure that the clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives didn't call their names.
And the clerk was Edward McPherson from Gettysburg.
All right. Sorry, I don't know all the local color, but I think Ross is on my back to make sure. So what that meant was, it's hard to believe, but the congressional radical Republicans had a working majority. I repeat that, a working majority, which is the total necessity to actually get anything done. You can make all the great points, but if you don't have a working majority, you can't get stuff done. And did Thaddeus Stevens and the radical Republicans get stuff done? More than we can really imagine. Probably in those 2 years, more profound changes that ever took place in the history of the United States, even probably, though it's debatable, more than the New Deal. They made sure that not only the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment passed, but they set up a series of Reconstruction laws that said if you wanted to get back into this country as a Confederate state, you had to do a whole bunch of stuff and giving black men the right to vote. Before the 15th Amendment, And what that meant was that 500,000 African American men voted in the election of 1868, and voted for, many of them, their commanders, because Thaddeus Stevens had agitated with Frederick Douglass to not only get Lincoln to push for the Emancipation Proclamation, but to make sure that free and escaped slaves could become part of the U.S. Army. And these colored troops fought for their own liberation and helped defeat the South, came home and persuaded some reluctant white people that they deserved the right to vote. And then in 1868, 500,000 free African-American male voted for Grant with a turnout of 80%, and was able to defeat the 1868 Democratic candidate, Horatio Seymour, whose slogan was, "This is a white man's country. White men should rule." And to use a phrase from today, no dog whistles there. Now, if we look at what Thaddeus Stevens accomplished, he helped create the Freedmen's Bureau so that people could actually learn how to read and write and develop their own destiny. He made sure that through these state constitutions, that divorce was changed, roads were built, people could serve on juries, and 1,500 to 2,000 African American elected officials were elected. So he had a profound effect on day-to-day life. And it wasn't until a sector of the white Republican Party turned against these changes, partly because he proposed that should not only have political equality, but also economic equality. And that's why when my wife, C.J. Prentice, and I walked our dog named Thaddeus, we were able to say to people when they asked, "Why'd you name Thaddeus?" We were able to give like a short description of how we not only needed political equality, just feel yourself eminent, but you needed economic equality. In other words, the free people needed to be able to have their own power and their own land. But that never took place. And if it did take place, we would have a whole different country. Can you imagine if we had economic equality, no racial gap, and the whole society would be transformed into a sector of equality? Now, my wife also stands out now. She doesn't know I'm going to say this, but she's one of the only people living who voted to ratify the 14th Amendment. How could that happen? She was a senator in the Ohio General Assembly, and somehow someone discovered Ohio never ratified the 14th Amendment. So they had a vote. She voted for the 14th Amendment, we lived in Cleveland and she worked in Columbus, and she came back. She said, she told me what happened. I said, what was the vote? One person voted against it. Ironically, his wife is now in the Ohio General Assembly, and she's the lead sponsor of one of those laws that says you're going to lose your teacher's license if you teach about racism. The legacy of Thaddeus Stevens is not only to bring pride to Gettysburg, to serve as a beacon when people from all over the country visit Gettysburg and they can find out the power of Thaddeus Stevens, but it's even something deeper. As the protests against the murder of George Floyd spread across the country, there arose a movement to get rid of the images of our racist past. The Confederate statues, the names of buildings, and that's all important. But the symbol of Thaddeus Stevens says that we need to recognize people who fought against racism, white supremacy, and for equality, so people can understand it's not enough to just try to wipe out symbols of white supremacy. We must hold up freedom fighters all over the country who actually are willing to be there. So in closing, what I hope happens is in every small town, in every city, people get together and find out their own local freedom fighter to be able to give the kind of leadership that the Thaddeus Stevens Society did in Gettysburg, so that when people drive, when they visit, when they learn in their textbooks, as the Zen Education Project is doing, to understand Reconstruction and what's really important. And we know that we will have shortly a cadre of 15 or 20 teachers named after C.J. Prentice and Michael Charney, the C.J. Prentice Fellows, who will go around the country and spread the word that understanding textbooks and understanding curricula against white supremacy is not enough. What we need to do is figure out how everyone in their own local community can be as powerful as the Thaddeus Stevens Society, form their own societies dedicated to remembering freedom fighters, and then we can actually we've already begun, we can even deepen the removal of the stain that Thaddeus Stevens fought every day of his life to end, a legacy of equality and a commitment to undoing white supremacy, not only by ending slavery, not only by redistributing land, but also by having a society that prides itself that we are really a society of equality. Thank you very much.
That was incredibly eloquent. In fact, if you were a little younger, I'd probably try to get you to be president of the Thaddeus Stevens Society. I think you'd be a good person.
But now we can do it by Zoom.
But as a token of our appreciation, I want to present to you a book that was printed in 1869.
Clearly not for people who are old and can't read.
But
small print.
It's memorial addresses on the life and character of Thaddeus Stevens. Let's see, House of Representatives. And this is my particular favorite quote about Thaddeus Stevens that I'm going to read. It's pretty short. And this is by Congressman Donald. And he said, he never stepped down upon the lower plane of popular error, but at all times and on all occasions he dared to do right, looking heaven in the face and fearing no man. He never flattered the people. He never attempted to deceive them. He never flattered with them in a double sense. He never courted and encouraged their errors. On the contrary, on all occasions, he attacked their sins. He assailed their prejudices. He outraged all their bigotries. And when they turned upon him and attacked him, he marched straight forward like Gulliver wading through the fleets of the Lilliputians, dragging his enemies after him into the great harbor of truth.